I started thinking about the Evan Ingram injury earlier today, and it got me started to percolate about all of the different talent levels in this Denver Broncos tight end room and how without Evan Ingram, the Broncos are still devoid of a major area on their offensive team. So, this entire episode is going to be dedicated to telling you about two additions the Broncos could trade for before the trade deadline. Let me start by saying this. I know. Trade videos. You don't like them unless there's a developing story. However, two of the players that I'm about to name in today's episode have been linked not only to the Denver Broncos, but also have been very frustrated with their current role on their current team. And it would make sense because both of these guys are incredibly talented, and both of them are looking for new homes. So let's start by talking about the trade deadline. When is it? November 5th, 2025, otherwise known as Week 9. So that might sound like it's forever away, but realistically, it's only 6 weeks away. Good teams, by the way, in case you weren't familiar, usually add players. Bad teams usually sell for picks. I believe the Broncos are still a good team. I think they've shot themselves in the foot. I think they haven't played nearly as buttoned up as they can be, but there's way too much talent on this team, both offensively and defensively, to not be a playoff team in 2025. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, what are the Broncos' weak spots that I'm talking about? Well, the first weak spot is middle linebacker, but we've talked ad nauseum about how they need to get a middle linebacker. And if you want to go watch a video about different linebacker options that could service the Broncos, go check out one of my most recent videos that I put out on our live show the other day. It's Major Moves is the title of that video. But the other two weak spots, tight end and wide receiver. Moose, we got Evan Ingram. That's not a weak spot. Well, Evan Ingram's injured right now. And he's got that lingering calf thing. He was out with his back last week. So there's a lot of unknowns when it comes to the tight end position. And wide receiver, while there's not any injuries, I still feel like we're not getting the production we would have nearly wanted or the separation we want to see from some of the younger players. So today's show is going to be dedicated to giving you two trade candidates at the tight end and the wide receiver position to target with those trade ideas. Two players that I believe can make an immediate impact if the Broncos are serious about making a Super Bowl push. And again, you're probably thinking, we're so far from the Super Bowl. Again, I get it, but if you want to really add to this team, here are some options for you. Let's start talking about the Broncos tight end depth chart. Outside of Evan Ingram, there isn't a whole lot of talent. Lucas Krull has moments. Adam Troutman is a good blocking tight end. But when it comes to what a tight end is known for, which is vertical seam routes over the middle of the field, a mover of chains, a young quarterback's best friend, those other three aren't getting it done. Evan Ingram can be, but we just haven't seen it materialize in 2025. So let's talk about the trade candidates that I'm bringing up. First one being David Njoku of the Cleveland Browns. Now let's talk a little bit about David Njoku because I believe David Njoku is one of the most underrated tight ends in the NFL. And this season so far, he's had a limited role because of the most recent acquisition the Browns made in the NFL draft, which was Harold Fannin Jr. out of Bowling Green. So if we talk about David Njoku from a career perspective and as a player, he's a 2017 first-round pick by the Cleveland Browns, and he has lived up to his first-round status. 363 career receptions. 2023 was his best in terms of productivity when it came to his yards. He put up 882 receiving yards that year. And like I said, Harold Fannin Jr., this rookie out of Bowling Green, is clearly the Browns' tight end number one. A relationship has definitely been cultivated with Joe Flacco. But if you're wondering where the connection is here to the Denver Broncos, here's where it starts to get interesting. Here's what MSN had to say about David Njoku. David Njoku remains one of the league's most talented tight ends. He has tremendous hands, tremendous size, creates mismatches against linebackers, and thrives in the red zone. However, Njoku is entering the final year of his contract, and the Browns drafted Harold Fannin Jr. in the third round of the 2025 draft. Cleveland already trusts Fannin as he drew 9 targets in week 1 and turned into 7 catches for 63 yards. With Fannin's quick involvement in the offense, Njoku's future becomes more uncertain. I think it is an absolute home run if Denver trades for a guy like this. The article goes on to say that not only is Njoku a good fit for the Denver Broncos, but they also go on to say that it's a perfect yin and yang to what Evan Ingram does well and what David Njoku does well, because they're different stylistically. Even though Njoku can do the same things that Evan Ingram does, Evan Ingram is a lot more silky of a player, lines up in the slot a whole lot more, whereas David Njoku is a lot more effective in the play action game, in the red zone, and doing more over the middle of the field when it comes to mismatches against linebackers. Has more strength to push off those bigger defenders. So here's the proposed trade that I'm going to give you. The Browns receive the 4th round pick acquired by the Denver Broncos in the Devon Vele trade. So we still keep a 4th round pick, and we get David Njoku. I think this makes a whole lot of sense. And you might look at it and say, we don't need David Njoku. We don't want to pay David Njoku. And I totally understand what you're saying. But this is one area that the Denver Broncos absolutely need to shore up, especially if we see a limited amount of action from our most recent free agent in Evan Ingram. So would you make this trade? If the Browns' Jimmy Haslam called up General George Paton and said, hey, we want to move David Njoku. What are you going to offer? And Peyton said a 4th. Would you make this deal? I totally would, in a heartbeat. But let me know in the comment section down below. Coming up next, I've got my one other trade proposal. Excuse me, that's my fault. I meant to say 1 instead of 2 there because there is only one other player on this list. And spoiler, he's a whole lot bigger of a name than David Njoku, and he doesn't play the tight end position. He plays the wide receiver position. But before we do that, I have to tell you about my friends over at Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every single day, but on Prize Picks, you can actually get paid to be right. Don't miss any of the excitement this football season on Prize Picks, where it is good to be right. Very simple to play. Pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. If you get your picks correct, you could cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. It is the best way to win cash this football season. Join millions of users and sign up today. Here's what my lineup looks like for week number 4. Jalen Hurts on my max discount play. Obviously, he's going to get more than half a passing yard. But then Cortland Sutton I want on the more of the receiving yards. And then Will Lutz, I believe, is going to have a big day as well with more than 1.5 field goals made. Yours can look like this, but it can look completely different than this if you don't trust Moose's picks. All you got to do is download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Price Picks. It's good to be right. Okay. We've talked about this guy on the channel before. And admittingly, back then, it was more of a reach, because Tyreek Hill had just gotten to Miami. He was coming off of some unbelievable seasons, and it looked like the Dolphins weren't ready to part ways. That has completely changed. So before you turn off the video and say, I don't want to read about any Tyreek Hill trades, there might make some sense. And believe it or not, Tyreek Hill to the Broncos has actually been reported by one of the major contributors to the NFL. ESPN has suggested that Tyreek Hill is completely done in Miami. You'll hear from CBS Sports a little later, too, why it makes sense for the Denver Broncos. Here's what ESPN, though, had to say about Tyreek Hill's time in South Beach. Here's the one that everyone's been talking about since the offseason. Hill was openly dissatisfied when the 2024 season ended, and while the team did not move on from him, he and quarterback Tua Tagovailoa talked in training camp about the fact that he and the relationship between Hill and the team was in need of repair. He is still a 31-year-old wide receiver with no guaranteed money on his deal in 2026. That is a major factor in all of this. And with the base salary of only $10 million next year, it wouldn't be tough for any team to take this on. Meaning, for what he is right now and where the contract lies, he is prime for a trade. And you wouldn't have to give up nearly what the Dolphins did to get Tyreek Hill. And this season so far, it's not been good. But I do believe that the relationship between he and Tua has completely soured. It's clear that Tua doesn't like him. It's clear that Tyreek doesn't want to be there. He wants to be done. They just need to part ways. I will admit, for the Broncos, it's a short-term solution. This is not something that I believe you would sign Tyreek Hill to for a 4-year extension. Maybe something similar to what you gave Evan Ingram. 2 years, right around $10 million a year, let him ride out his career, and if he wants to go play in a 1-year deal after he's done with the Broncos, so be it. But you can't deny that even as early as 2023, just 2 seasons ago, Tyreek Hill was outstanding. Almost I'm going to put it at 1,800 yards because that's 1 yard short. 1,800 yards and 13 touchdowns. In 2024, the numbers dropped off significantly, but Tua also missed 5 games because of concussion protocol. And then this year, it's clear that more of the translation issues have bled into it. So why does it also make sense for the Denver Broncos stylistically? Well, right now, the Denver Broncos offense is not stretching the ball down the field. Well, Moose, isn't Tyreek Hill a deep threat? Yes, but he's also a yak monster. Meaning, you can use him in the short term, and with his speed that he still boasts very much about, he can absolutely do damage in open field. So in the screen game, while Marvin Mims clearly struggles to develop this season, and while Troy Franklin is still developing his skills, Tyreek Hill could be a player that you could bring in to immediately pacify this certain short game passing situation. Then Marvin Mims can do what he does best, which is stretch the field. So then you have Tyreek Hill that kind of takes over that screen game, that short-term intermediate passing, and Marvin Mims stretches the field. Troy Franklin then becomes like that hybrid 3/4. And if Troy Franklin is your 4, now you've got a legitimate, solidified, and unbelievable Denver Broncos wide receiver room. So what does it cost to get Tyreek Hill? Not nearly what you think it does. Again, you could give up the 4th round pick that you got from the Saints and a 5th this year, plus some cash compensation, because I know the Dolphins want to get that contract off the books, right? They don't want to take on nearly as much dead cap hit. So you give them some cash, you give them 2 picks on day 3, and you get Tyreek Hill. Where's the connection? CBS Sports, on it. Here's what they said. This was 2 weeks ago, by the way. Coach Sean Payton has been very complimentary of Hill's football IQ in the past, and it just so happens that Denver could still use an added playmaker for young quarterback Bo Nix, even with current number 1 wideout Cortland Sutton secure on a new contract. Tight end Evan Ingram is banged up, and Marvin Mims remains unproven as a speedy number 2 on the perimeter. And I love this so much. As a bonus, moving to the Mile High City would allow Hill to return to the AFC West for a couple of shots at his old friends, the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, it's just poetry, isn't it? Doesn't it sound like he would make a perfect fit? Even more so than the likes of maybe a David Njoku, who I believe would make an excellent addition to the Denver Broncos. I think Tyreek Hill to the Broncos now makes more sense than it ever has. But again, that's just my take on it. If you think that Tyreek Hill should be traded for, type T for trade. If you think it should not be traded for, type P for pass. If you're like, I don't want anything to do with that. And again, all the locker room issues, all of the off-field stuff, all of the attitude, I get it. So I totally understand if you say P for pass. But from a football talent and fit perspective, Tyreek Hill to Mile High makes too much sense not to talk about it. Before I end today's episode, I want to thank you guys for 41,000 subscribers. You have been outstanding. We are well on our way to 42,000 here, almost 7,000 new subscribers since I took over the channel, which is an unbelievable milestone. So hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Mile High salute to all of you, and be cool.